Hi, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here. This is a really special occasion for NAWP, which stands for not at AWP, but is also really, I call it NAWP more often than not because it's grown beyond the FOMO of um, not being at AWP because, after those 3 or 4 days, we're all in the same boat. We're not there anymore. And so it's NOP, like, the barbaric yawp of Whitman. Uh, we typically do monthly events, monthly readings, and we like to provide a space for new and emerging readers, people that have new books, want to promote themselves, open mics. But this month, I really wanted to provide a different kind of space to kind of address what's going on globally. It felt like for a while that um, it wasn't a purposeful silence, but it felt like a silence on my part and on NOP's part to not say anything about what's going on in Gaza. And so I wanted to kind of rectify that. And before that, I had wanted to promote our readers, um, regardless of what's going on. It just kind of, the confluence of those things came together, and it all kind of made sense. And together we decided to ask you all to donate to MedGlobal, which it seems has a a better track record of getting aid to where it's needed, especially right now where things are more blockaded and hard to get to. And so we wanted to provide a little good on top of the joy of just sharing our work. And so I want to thank you all for being a part of that. We raised almost $1,300, which is really great. And so thank you for your generosity, and thank you for being here. And I'm really excited. So I'm going to go right into introducing our readers. Our first reader is SM Badawi, and she is an Arab American poet and teacher whose work has been published in Hayden's Ferry Review, Cream City Review, Orange Blossom Review, and many other journals. Her poetry has been featured in Poetry Daily and has been nominated for Best of the Net, the Nina Riggs Poetry Award, and the Pushcart Prize. She's a Tin House Workshop alumna and has received fellowships and awards from Summer Literary Seminars and Florida Atlantic University. She currently lives in the Pacific Northwest, where she teaches writing at Portland Community College. And as a side note, I really don't think I would be as good a poet as I try to be if it wasn't for her. Probably the best reader I've ever worked with. Thank you so much. And uh, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jared, for the introduction. And thank you all for being here. And thank you for donating to a cause that is so necessary and important right now. And to that end, I did want to open by reading from Musab Abu Taha's book, Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. He is a Palestinian poet from Gaza, and currently he's a refugee in Egypt right now. Um, his book opens with a poem called Palestine A to Z, and it's a long poem, but I was just going to read O and P for you. Jaffa is known around the world for its oranges. My grandmother, Khadra, tried to take some oranges with her in 1948, but the shelling was heavy. The oranges fell on the ground, the earth drank their juice. It was sweet, I'm sure. In Gaza, we had a clay oven that our neighbor Munir built for us. When my mother wanted to bake, I fed it wood stems or cardboard to heat it for the bread. The woody stems were made from dried plants, pepper, eggplant, and corn stalks. P. A poem is not just words placed on a line, it's a cloth. Mahmoud Darwish wanted to build his home, his exile, from all the words in the world. I weave my poems with my veins. I want to build a poem like a solid home, fully with my bones. Until 2014, a friend called and said, Izzet was killed. I asked, which Izzet? Izzet, your friend. My phone slipped from my hand and I began to run, not knowing where. What's your name? Mosab. Where are you from? Palestine. What's your mother tongue? Arabic, but she's sick. What's the color of your skin? There is not enough light to help me see. And we are so very glad that Musab is alive and is with some of his family in Egypt right now. All right, I'm going to be reading a mix of new and newer work. So I'm being brave today. I'm going to start with a poem called Poem in Which All My Dreams Come True. If tightrope, if atom, if evergreen, if silence, if tea, if blood, if thief, if memory, if tadpole, if wicker, if tooth, if grief, if hiccup, if language, if spell, if God, if nothing, if me, if stone. This is another one called Field Notes on the Temporary State of Longing. It was just published in Atmospheric Quarterly, which is a new journal. They just launched Tuesday. So if you're looking to read the new journal, check them out. They're very cool. I followed a red balloon to the tree of Languelonde captive. How I search for a crack between pulse and vowel, a space neither cloud nor clay. How you asked, until when? Until the nest, until red rust, until the tree began to buck, each fruit and leaf and layer of bark. How you called this wintering. In late November, the flood and its gathering on root. How your mouth said you were tired, even as your hands filled with soil. How the axe, flecks of wood on its steeliest parts. How seeds began to scatter, the ground filled with luster, thickened with want. I could hear nothing but the whoosh of the tree's limbs, how they strained against the harness of the earth, magnet to something unseen. This next one's called Allegory, and it's on the death of St. Catherine. And I'm just going to give you a little background on St. Catherine. You don't necessarily need it for the poem, but I think it's cool, so I want to share it. St. Catherine is the patron saint of sickness and miscarriages, and she was beheaded in Egypt. And it was reported that when she was beheaded, she did not bleed, but a white substance leaked from her neck. And then after she died, her hair continued to grow, and that her body produced an oil that people claimed was healing. So her monastery right now is at the base of Mount Sinai in Egypt. Allegory. One night the prophet comes to me in a dream. Hello, I do not say to him. In the morning I gather myself into white cloth, carry my body to Mount Sinai to seek God and his mercy. At the peak, I genuflect beneath him, half light, half fog. I descend by way of the steps, desert sand crusting my upper lip. I shadow caves where hermits once lost themselves to the dark. I travel to the white desert, my new light invisible against stone. Under the stars, I call to myself. Wild dogs howl their warning. Pebbles shake, not in resurrection, but excavation. Beyond Lake Maroon, a mirage takes shape. I brush the chalk from her cheeks, rough as loofah. I whisper, I need some softness. She hands me an olla to wash. I leak milk, drizzle shattering white rock. She navigates the fissure and I follow. When she hands me the skull of a gazelle, my fingers curve under the bowed bone. I discover horns strewn against the rock. The dead girl long raided. All night she will call to me in my voice. I am here, don't fall asleep. This poem's called On Maryam, an Archetype, and it's after Leila Chati. I am tired of the story in which I find myself contoured into a figure, my body revered, my child's body divine. I did not know the heft of light, how much space it took up, a weight that left me gasping for me and mine. Oh, to have kept this secret, let something grow quiet inside me. Let no one know what God had done in the shadow of a date tree. Oh Lord, you had the power to cloak me in darkness. Keep me hidden in the sliver of a tent flap. Let me grow under cover of moon and cloud. Oh, to have let my hip sink soft in the night, breath caught by camel and fox, a child's cry flurrying across the desert, fading so no one would know what had filled me, who I had contained between sand and sky. A boy, only for me, only for us. Oh, to unwind the wound, the miracle, and his virgin mother, to have lived another life as woman, as river, as bird, as stone, a grain of salt, white crystal, sparkle in the sun. This one's called Portrait of a Miscarriage, and it comes with a note at the top, and it says, Islamic scholars say that fetuses receive a soul at 120 days, and if they are miscarried after, they will drag their mothers by their umbilical cords to paradise. Any fetus miscarriage before 120 days does not have a soul, and therefore mothers will not be granted paradise for their loss. If you cannot drag me by the cord, I ask that you leave me to a field of light. Leave me lying in a bed of grass, my body dark and distant, ravenous ink dot against a blur of marigold. I ask that you leave me in the kingdom of hooves and udders, dried up nipples brushed with dust, an animal as a metaphor for itself, its pain, a thief of mouth and apology, the taste of copper on its tongue. I ask that you leave my lips chapped, and when you pray, use ghost grammar. Howl, not a verb, but a conjunction of God drifting in, then out. I ask that you remember me, a tunnel, then pilgrim, reluctant in my grief, obedient in my giving. This one's called Witness, and it was published in Queen City Review and then republished by Poetry Daily. We found God in a tree. A boy hung on silk cotton, hummed a tune about mothers and lovely ladies, youth mouth clamoring, expectant. I remember the climb after him, how limbs shook as vines mapped their way up the trunk, fat leaves darkening roots below. In this way, the boy started to chant. He didn't know the words, but he knew how to say them. Prayed away the disease of doubt. He pushed me, and he kept on praying. And God found him the shadow, damned to darkness. When I fell, I found God in my teeth. I gaped right up at the boy who etched witness onto the tree, the W sung deepest in the wood. He later became a doctor, found God again stitching a girl's lip. 2 stitches, the length of Adam's first incision. First, do no harm, but he had already harmed, smudged his shadow onto the salty seam as if to anoint the sick with his mercy. Sometimes mercy is enough, and sometimes it isn't. The opposite of mercy is cruelty. The doctor was commanded to save, though he tugged hard on the suture, signed witness on her chart to notarize the blood, witness to the wound, witness to the tree, witness to the God who commanded, bleed, and so we bled. All right, and we've got two more. This one's called Body in the Throes of Myth, and it was published by Hayden's Fairy Review. 1. I come willing, azure flitting moans in a room free of archetype. My hospital gown is not white. Underneath faded petals, I scramble to embody anything other than myself. I hedgehog, quills uneven grown. No one has taught me the origami of pain. My brain pixelates shock. Across the expanse of my barren back, a fear curling body inward to protect itself from itself. I hear, push with your abs, I unfurl, hog on display. Quills nail me to the bed, I bear down. 2. My spine curves into sand, unable to shed thick skin symbol, scarab poised to expel, but the body latches onto its own memory. No woman has ever come before me but me. I cave, belly skin ice. I would make a good igloo, only I was promised wings. I was promised wings. 7 times around the room. Where are my stones? 1 pebble to prove myself. My back exits stage left. Blue curtain separates me, cleaved, muscles pulled aside. The ocean lies open like a floating lotus. Nothing to bear but the moment itself. A blood performance in white light. Hair covered, face uncovered. And before the last one, Storm is here. He just wants to say hi. So, and hopefully he'll still quiet. All right. This last one is really new and it still doesn't have a title yet. But it has an epigraph and it comes from Kaveh Akbar's The Miracle. It wasn't until Gabriel squeezed away what was empty in him that the prophet could be filled with miracle. Imagine the emptiness in you. Thirsty, the way the throat chases nectar, heart a hummingbird without buzz. All night the belly lies empty. The first taste of water, holiness, delicious dusk, spring of milk and honey. Swallow and satiate, street light, moonlit, split, open. Pray towards the dogwoods, pinkless buds, motherless and genderless in this language. Inside me, more wreck than flower, wet and sticky, gluey sound of something opening, separating. Miracle, ever resistant to witness. My body, no more powerful than a fig, no more dangerous than a goldfish. My body, a white flag. My body, a dawn waiting to be blessed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. They were wonderful. Our next reader is Madja Gama. She was born in Beirut to a Saudi father and American mother. She's the author of the chapbook, The Call of Paradise, which was selected by Diane Seuss as the winner of the 2022 Two Sylvia's Chapbook Prize. Her full-length manuscript won the Wandering Angus Book Award and will be published in 2025. Recent poems appeared in the Adroit Journal, The Offing, Plowshares, and Poetry. Poems are forthcoming from Prairie Schooner and Shenandoah, where she is the 2023 Gray Beale Gowan Prize winner for Virginia Poets. She loves cardamom in her tea, saffron in her chocolate, and rosewater in everything. Let's welcome Madja Gama.
Thank you so much for having me. And Sally, you took my breath away. This is such a beloved group to be a part of. And I'm here as a fan listening to your poems and to Faisal's. It's really a joy. Maybe I'm sure people here will understand how much community has been the glue keeping people together over the past couple of months. And I really feel that the poetry community has mostly been there for each other, for the most part. Aside from social media, in my life, in my real life, off of the internet, I've found mostly a lot of unity and a lot of common ground. And I'm happy to be here on that common ground. I'd like to start with a poem by Maya Abu al-Hayat from her book, You Can Be the Last Leaf, Selected Poems, translated by Fadi Judah. Poem is Whistling. Do you see this hole in my neck? Not sure if it was a bullet or a word that did it, but I'm certain 2 lips passed over it and left a whistling behind, and also a rustle whenever I turn to the future or the past. So I am going to weave in some newer, maybe rougher drafts, don't judge please, along with poems that have already been published, and also from my chapbook, The Call of Paradise. This next poem I wrote about my first Ramadan that I ever tried to fast. And it's called Ramadan 1979. Barely old enough to fast, my father agreed to half a day with water. In the morning, I put on my slippers and moved with the rhythm of our household, a little mimic to the adults who woke to pray Fajr. The adhan in Alexandria was worth flinging windows open to and drinking in while sitting on a plastic chair on our balcony, worth turning Abba off so that the voice of the muezzin could be heard over modern noise. I watched the Mediterranean Sea and said its other name. I heard my name given a new syllable. I sipped water on the morning of the first day of the holy month, while the crescent pearled on the horizon. I lived again on the Hijra calendar. It was a revolutionary year. I turned 7. My first Ramadan was in Alexandria, Egypt, my family lived there for a time, and I'm just starting to write some stories about poems and stories about that. The next poem is from my chapbook called Paradise. And this is called Like a Gear Falcon in the Desert, I was raised to be useless. My grandmother wore white, the color of mourning. All my life, she made this no color tangible. She told my father to give me everything and more. If she asks for a horse, you must give her a horse. In the morning light, an Arctic native flies to its trainer from a mount across the sand to a reward of dead meat. Its black tracking antenna is clipped to white feathers. It must not feel the weight of the all-blue sky, but I do. It kicks its claws in the sand, shouts out falcon sounds. On the gauntlet, it won't meet the eyes of anyone standing close. Such beauty is hard to look at. The danger of being visible both day and night. Thank you. This is a new poem that I wrote during the pandemic. It's called Prayer Carpet. Arabic word for the bowing movement in prayer is rik'ah. If I kneel in prayer at all, it is on a wedge of pale green foam before the wood poppy with its oaken leaves and hairy seed pods, signaling that its season of rest nears. Its roots cling to the black plastic planter, seeking life outside the world it grew into. The ground is damp and easy to move, with worms tunneling away from the scant woodland light. I remember my father's heels when he prayed, prostrated in sujood, the underside soft, beige, moist from ablutions. I knew he prayed for me when I was young. Why doesn't she pray? Our family always asks. One pandemic day, I sat in a Virginia park, isolated in the heat-wavered parking lot. Beneath a pin oak tree, a man in bare feet stood facing east. In one easy movement, he kneeled before touching the sidewalk with his forehead. In the near distance, a man flew his drone over the baseball fields and batting cages, over a desert of jewel green grass. So if you know anything about native plant gardening, and I am a native plant gardener, you'll understand why grass is considered not very nourishing. So hence the desert of green grass. This is another new poem. It's so new, I'm not even sure if it works, but hear me out. It's called Camel Jamal. Do you ride a camel to school? Does it see you from your door to the school by an oil well? Does it live near the aleph of your tent, all legs and nodding head in the Arabic of the A? Why haven't you melded into the legs of America? Your lamb, your L, not docile to touch. What is the word for father in your language? Did he bear you away from your mother, kidnap you to a country full of stinking ships rising from the desert? Their lips punctuate a beautyless face, but their lashes, oh, the lashes, lower over the poetry of a people. Meme is for metaphor, for beauty in the embodiment of desert women. What language will you hear me in if I say the taste of camel milk is the jim of Jamil, and that our tongues have forgotten the call of its butterfat? Our bodies grow on the blue milk sea of cows and the sibilance of their meat. When my father passed in the nascence of autumn, my cousins asked me to continue his sacrifice, showed me receipts in Arabic for sheep and camel given to the knife for his 3 daughters. In the camel beauty contests of the Khalij, the white female is the prize. And if one ever met its fate as vessel for my father's devotion, I will admit in the cognates of 2 languages that I have finally forgiven him. Thank you. Thanks. I guess I have time for a few more. Let me delve back into the chapbook to a poem called 3 Doorways. Also, the book is really, I chose a white cover because I would say for the past decade, I've been mourning my father, as has my whole family. He was the favorite of his generation, very generous human being. And white is the color of mourning, and it's a color I dislike. I never wore it. I was a teenage goth, a 20-something goth, and I'm now a 50-something goth. Black is my color. So this poem is called Three Doorways, and yeah, it's also about him. Three doorways. One, the one your mother held open for you was the first door, and it cannot be remembered but by her. That story builds over time. It was a swift birth, or waters broke at sunrise on equinox, or the head stuck in the canal until sunset. Her door opened for you, you arrived. Two, there was a doorway in Taif in our old summer home, my father pictured there in his birth room. A lintel above him of pierced woodwork, tinted turquoise to turn away jealous eyes. Eyelids close to his image, his memory, then open. The door of the soul begins him again. Three, when my sister was born, I asked to name her Layla after the nighttime that beckoned me from my father's doorway. He wanted the name of his sister who lived an unfulfilled life. The weight of a name rose and fell in conversation. I wanted the letters of two languages to hold her in place. I'll end with, I suppose, another pandemic poem. I know Jared is an eco-poet, and I want him to know that I am too. This is about finding solace in my native plant garden, which was my whole world in the first couple of years of the pandemic. And it's a nocturne. The time to pretend there is no darkness to come is done. The soft release of twilight, gone gray, then gone. I thought what was outside would stay outside, have flinched at every knock I hear, then welcomed the orb weaver, the wren that beds down in the wreath on my door. She turns her back to the harsh floodlight above. And the leopard frog that found its way to the common milkweed. It disappeared into an underlayer of ripe sage. The juvenile skink, with his tail slashed blue, begins to linger. When they go into darkness, I will go to the bed of whitewood aster, ringed around a magnolia. The thimbleweed that raised welts on my forearms as I placed it in the soil, thinking of my new dead. It grows there alongside nodding onion, iris cristata, foam flower, fleabane. This is where the drupes and the seeds do the work of restoration. The bare bed that looks abandoned, with a hem of wild columbine in its first year, holds the spring ephemerals, buried as pale knobbed bodies, with years to go before they bloom. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your generosity in donating.
Thank you so much. And I'll say on behalf of everybody that all your poems work, whether they're drafts or established published things. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Faisal Mohyuddin. Faisal is the author of Elsewhere, an elegy, which just came out from Next Page this year. The Displaced Children of Displaced Children, Eyewear 2018, and The Riddle of Longing, Backbone 2017. He teaches English at a high school in suburban Chicago and creative writing at Northwestern University's School of Professional Studies. He also serves as a master practitioner with the global not-for-profit Narrative 4 and is a visual artist. And you can find him at www.faisalmohyuddin.com. Thank you so much. Let's give a welcome to Faisal.
Thank you so much, Jared. I know Mitch is not here, but thank you both for organizing this series. And I'm really just so honored and grateful to be with Sally and Madja here, and all of you that are here. Thank you for being here. And as everyone said before, the generosity I can't even say it right. I mean, just you've been so generous and it's been amazing. I actually did a fundraiser with MedGlobal back in November, and I got to meet some of the doctors who are actually in Gaza working. This was in late October, early November, and just to kind of have spoken to them, I feel really strongly about this charity, and I'm glad that we're all here together. So it is, I just broke my fast, and so much that your Ramadan poems where I was like, I'm living it right now. I know others may be as well. So in the spirit of that, Sally, you started, and then much that you continue, like a poem from somebody else. So this is a poem from a poet named Sami Al-Qasim, also a Palestinian poet, and it's a short piece. It's called, and it's translated from Arabic, End of a Discussion with a Jailer. From the window of my small cell, I can see trees smiling at me, roofs filled with my people, windows weeping and praying for me. From the window of my small cell, I can see your large cell. I write and I write a lot about, obviously my faith as a Muslim. I write a lot about my dad, who I lost. It's been 8 years now, but it feels it's still, that grief is fresh. My new book that Jared mentioned is a grief sequence. But I'm going to read the opening poem from my first full-length collection, which is an imagined conversation between a child and their father. And it's called The Opening, and it's kind of like a dialogue back. And it's kind of this, after I lost my dad, this poem kind of came to me. So I'll read this to start, The Opening. And one thing I'll say is my family, we're talking about how my first name is pronounced, and my family's from Pakistan, and they say Faisal there, but it's also Faisal and Faisal. My dad was born right before the partition of 1947, and so he grew up at his childhood was like as a refugee, and kind of really dealing with, and not really knowing this until much later on, but a very, very turbulent and unstable childhood on one side of the border and fleeing to the other side of the border. And then he lost his dad. Actually, his dad was, when he was 12 or 13, his dad, I found out a few months before my dad died that he had been murdered. So just this sense of trauma and grief. And then he never talked about it. And so as I'm like watching everything, all the horrors right now, I keep thinking about like what is the kind of the everlasting impact of the grief and the tragedy for so many people is going to be. And so this poem kind of speaks to a little bit of that as well. The Child. Tell me, Father, what new turbulence took hold in your blood on the day of my birth? And did your stomach sink each time I cried out for the basket of your arms? The Father. I held you too close to feel anything but the wild gallop of your tiny heart. The Child. Did you recite the call to prayer in my ear? Slip your pinky dipped in honey in my mouth to mark with song and sweetness my entry into the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Father. All night I nursed a candle's flame, leaning in and out of its sphere of light, mumbling verses of the Quran, mispronouncing the Arabic, not understanding a word beyond Al-Fatiha, the opening, but knowing nonetheless I had fulfilled this first obligation of fatherhood. The Child. What was it like to look into my eyes for the first time? the father. I felt as if my fingers had combed the embryonic silt, feathering the deepest bottom of the ocean. And when I resurfaced, holding the key to fatherhood, I understood the true worth of being a living thing. The child. What did you say to mother when she could not find the words to tell you about how the breaking open of a body propels one toward heaven, that God promises the greatest share of paradise to mothers? The father. After a long silence, I said, to every unutterable thing buried in your heart, to every miraculous truth teetering on the tip of your tongue, yes, yes, Amen. The child. Did you spill the blood of 2 goats, give their meat to the poor, to bless my arrival, to mark the transition of my soul from the library of the eternal into the living fire of a body too fragile to share? The father. For 20 years, I harvested the silhouette of my father's voice from the night sky. Let its echo rock me to sleep whenever I felt so crushed by heartache that even God's infinite love, a rescue vessel sailing through a history of bloodshed and loss, could not hold me intact enough to believe in survival. So if it was my hand or another's that guided the blade along 2 throats, I cannot recall, nor do I want to. The child. What else might you have done had fatherhood not stolen you from the life you knew? The father. When a surgeon saves your life by amputating a limb housing a reservoir of poison, you do not curse the violence of their work, nor the pain of the procedure. You bow down before God. You thank the surgeon. You learn to write with the other hand, to walk on one leg. The child. One final question, Father. What should I say when my son, when I too become a father, asks me about the hours of your life that exist beyond my knowing? The father. Tell him more about the hours of your life, so his hunger is not as desperate nor as bottomless as ours. And so, I mean, one of the things that I still kind of carry with me was how much silence there was in my life and still is about so many things. And so, like, my new book, it comes out next week actually, but it's like, it's this one, that poem ends with like, talk to your child. My son was born in December of 2014, and my dad passed away in May of 2015. It was just a little bit over 4 months apart. And so this book is actually dedicated to my son. And so there are a series of haibun in there. And so I'm going to read the last haibun. Thank you. And each of the haibun has 3 titles. And haibun is a prose poem that ends with a haiku. And this is the last one in the book. The hourglass, the pebble, the throne of God. A haibun for the fatherless. Inside the lightless elegy, inside the lightless language of elegy. Each day, the waking musk of roses makes more strange the semantics of loss. I could choose the path of forgetting, temple the embering tenderness between brackets, and become less hunched by hunger than I am, or I could simply embrace the terror. If transcendence is still possible in a world as battered down as this one, then maybe it's better I let the listening dawn ladder my now kindled tongue back down to God. There, kneeling at his throne, I could say to him, I am sorry for my weaknesses, for every strange wish held meekly in my anguish. I could even relinquish my delirium for a more immediate doom, rush to wade through low tides of sunlight until the landscape hastens toward surrender. I could, with a scoop of glistening earth, entomb my better ear, the one less ravaged by hyperacusis, then toss from its mantle the hourglass, listen to its shattering botch my mumbled prayers. All this despite the heaps of mud meant to quiet the upheaval. Or as the distance between us will always be forever, I could loosen the trembling clutch of longing by pronouncing the pebble of your name over and over as if performing dhikr, until it comes to sound more like sand, until it too can sift more serenely through the songless hours of this fatherless life. Oh, Father, please forgive me. And this is the haiku. I've still not divined how to unhusk this steadfast grief from my poems. If you follow me on social media, you know I've been writing a lot of haiku about what's happening in Palestine and Israel. And it's been, for me, a way to take some really, like, almost bottomless, I'll use that word again, heartache and anguish, and at times it's anger and rage, and put them into a form that is small enough to kind of not overwhelm me. And I talked to someone who's a haiku master last week, actually, and she was saying, like, oh, your haiku are they're too emotional, not imagistic enough. And I appreciated that, because I'm not writing these to be a traditional haikuist, but I'm just venting, if I want to put it there. So I'm going to read 9, and they are what I call a prayer sequence. So ceasefire haiku is what I named them, and I know ceasefire has a lot of, it means different things to different people. So I'll just let the haiku speak for themselves. So there's 9 in this sequence. So 1. Pray for those who plant seeds in the rubble, who spurn despair as they're slain. 2. Pray for the young who've learned to translate rage into might, grief into light. 3. Pray for the elders whose blood holds a history blessed by fearlessness. 4. Pray for the storytellers whose sharpened voices cut through lies, free hope. 5. Pray for the newborns left to die. They too beheld this savage frailty. 6, pray for the distant witnesses. May they always fight for justice, peace. 7, pray for the villains too, that their dead hearts might house some buds of mercy. 8, pray for the dead, God's children martyred. Ask them for forgiveness, ours, yours. And 9, O Lord, bless us with bigger hearts, vast enough to hold grief and virtue. And my last poem, Jared, if I'm able to screen share, I will, otherwise I can just read it. It's an acrostic poem, so I thought like it's kind of fun to see the acrostic. I'm maybe giving it away a little bit, but if that's possible, I will. This poem actually came up at school yesterday, or Tuesday, and I was like, well, I haven't read this poem in a while.
You should have the ability to share now.
Okay, thank you. So this is called The Faces of the Holy. And so there's a journal in Evanston called Rhino. And one of the founding editors of Rhino is Helen Deegan Cohn, the late Helen Deegan Cohn. And I teach in a town north of the city, and then she actually lived in the town right next door. And so we got to know each other through Rhino and different poetry workshops. And we just started became friends. And I always thought of her as like my poetry grandmother. And her poetry is really amazing and very inspiring. And she wrote a lot about history. And she was a Holocaust survivor. Actually, at age 2 or 3, her sister was killed, and her parents and her were able to get refuge in the United States, and she settled in Chicago. And then it was actually I didn't know this until many months later, but she actually had a brain aneurysm during a poetry workshop she was leading, and I ended up passing away a few days later. And I found out many weeks later, because I just hadn't been in touch with her during that time. So this is a tribute and elegy I wrote for her, and it's going to be my closing piece here. So The Faces of the Holy. And so there is the epigraph from one of her poems that I love. It's for heaven loves the struggle and the brave faces of fiction, and no one will look upon the holy, for the face of the holy is ashes and smoke. How can the human heart, without ripping apart at the seams, ever house the immeasurable heartache of one's own history? Every life carries a library of loss, dark corridors lined with the never-ending almanacs of tragedy, yes. But where are the ones whose holy nature compels them to sing of the ashes and smoke, to render destruction into something worth remembering, perhaps even beautiful when held against the fire? They walk amongst us, guided by the voices of the dead, collecting wind-swept scraps of grief, exhuming from the silences the skeletal remains of ancestors whose names must be invented, reanimated by language. And as poets, communing every night with the angels of history, heaven opens its gates for them, gives each a turn to glance inside, to touch hands with the lost, to hear the unutterable prayers of the living echoing through their own yearning, even in death. This is what we now know is holiness, to heal the unhealable anguish of others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all our readers. Thank you so much to the generosity of our audience and donors. This has been a wonderful reading, and it's been wonderful to have you all in this space and sharing your amazing work. I appreciate you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful night.
Thanks so much for putting this together, and for the readers. You guys are all wonderful.